grass pavers?
That would be interesting. I'd have to chew on that one a little bit, Chuck, just because the zoning ordinance is pretty black and white. Of course, that's a conflict potentially with stormwater current thinking. And I'm not sure if that would or wouldn't work for the applicant here, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, my thinking is that the gravel is in place, the grass is growing over top of it. Sounds to me like a perfect green parking, paving, driving area.
But does the applicant want to do that?
I'm not familiar with grass pavers, and that's something I'd be interested in if that's, I mean, my goal is to make a presentable parking lot for my customers. So as long as, you know, I feel like gravel alone, for example, would be subpar. No one wants to go to the auto shop and park on gravel, as opposed to an asphalt parking lot or something like that. I feel that makes a better presentation to my customers. So, but something, you know, green alternatives such as what you're describing, I believe, is not something that's something I would definitely entertain as a possibility if that gets us, again, less impervious and can provide parking that I require. Those are my requirements.
So I'm thinking specifically about the area to the left of the garage where it's currently paved, where it's currently gravel. My question kind of to Pete would be, does that really need to be paved or in its existing condition? Because it looks like you're only going to use that for your use, not for the public use. Would that be correct?
Are you saying to the east or west of the mushroom house?
To the left would be west.
I'm sorry, west.
Right. As Nuri's engineer, I would appreciate the flexibility if some of the area that is currently gravel but supporting grass, if there were some latitude for some of that to remain, obviously that would give us some latitude in moving vehicles and other things around. And if it sustains grass, then I guess it becomes a gray or green area, depending on how you want to think about it. But that latitude could only help us in terms of providing a better engineered site. So to the extent that some of that could be interpreted as being allowed to remain, but only be utilized on a temporary or with some sort of provision allowing it to remain, obviously that gives us more latitude. We are, however, going to conform as required.
If I understand correctly, are we saying that area, you're saying to not pave that area, basically, is that correct?
I'm kind of asking the question whether or not we want as a group to require it, and whether or not the code would require it is really my question.
For any vehicle that's parked on it. So you're asking if there would be an ability to park vehicles over that area and allow the grass to remain and not pave over it.
Well, currently right now you're showing 4 spaces over there. And it looks like that's all there is. There's 4 spaces on the west side.
For direct parking spaces, but having that paved all the way around the west side of the building would allow for additional storage and would be very useful.
Oh, okay.
If it were paved, it would make sense to be able to use that for. There's always a need for more parking spaces in an automotive shop. Let's put it that way. Whether it's moving cars around temporarily or whatever the case may be, or even again personal use and things like that can also come into play. We also are trying to potentially use that as an area to further up towards the north end for waste disposal. Have the dumpsters up that way as well. So paving any area that we're allowed to without creating more issues or going into impervious is useful to me.
Okay, then
I-
it would
I
need
have
to
a
have a
question.
backup space
Oh.
there then. There's a backup. I was a little bit confused because there's no backup space for those parking spaces. Therefore, you couldn't really utilize those parking spaces without going off of the
Not
gray
for
area.
not for customers, but if I have to, if there's a vehicle that's waiting on parts for a day or two and I don't want it to eat up an actual customer parking space, I can place it someplace out of the way that doesn't impede on my use of the rest of the parking space.
If I could comment that the 4 spaces that you're speaking of are understood to be double parked. And
Okay.
it was an item of discussion when we talked with Pete and John a while back. We have more than enough parking spaces that meet all of the requirements for a 22-foot lane and a 9x18 space with adequate circulation. But because we understand the realities of a mechanic shop, we put these double stacked spaces in for vehicle storage.
I think that space can be utilized for parking spaces, but I don't know that you can actually count them as a parking space because, as written on a plan, calling it a parking spot is something that should be usable to the public. So the way that it is, I'm not saying you can't park cars there. That's a great idea, park them there, but I don't think they should be counted on the plan because I think the plan should only show actual spaces that can be used by the public. And I did have another question because when I looked at the plan, the 3 hatching areas we have is an existing asphalt pavement, existing gravel pavement, and proposed asphalt pavement. If all of the gravel pavement is to be paved with asphalt, it should probably say that in the legend.
Given that this is a sketch plan, I expect that there will be modifications to the plan that you see. This is obviously the sketch plan that we hope you will find acceptable. In final engineering, there will be some adjustments. We've already talked with Pete about a couple of minor things that we might tweak on this. One of them is to move the dumpster aside onto a small area near the northwest corner of the building so that we could achieve a circulation all the way around the building. Whether or not we would end up paving every bit of gravel, I understand is a point of discussion and hopefully not too big a sticking point. But when we do submit our final plan, there will be some tweaks to what you see now.
That's fine. I just wanted to mention that the way that the plan is presented, it doesn't appear that there's proposed asphalt where the gravel is right now because that hatching does not exist over top of the gravel. That's all. You can correct it for the final plan. It's just a comment.
Yep, and I've made a note that we will, if we have double stacked parking, we will not call it out as parking to meet code.
Great, thank you. I think Chuck's original question goes into number 3 then as well, in that the response and reasons for narrowing the driveway, it may not need to be narrowed if there was able to be grass pavers that were considered pervious elsewhere in the plan, and you still might not go over the required amount.
Well, what we've done since our conversation with Pete a couple of days ago is we have looked at how much new impervious would be required to make the 80-foot segment that he speaks of in his comment number 3 a full 20 feet wide. And we have found that that's going to require on the order of 800 square feet of new impervious. Pete made a good suggestion that we are working with, and that is that beneath to the south of all of our parking, there is a triangle of gray area that we could conceivably change from impervious to pervious and do some horse trading to get the additional impervious we need to widen the driveway. We have found that the triangle that we believe Pete was speaking of will give us about 500 square feet. And so we now need to find a place to save about 300 more square feet, because we are very close to the 2,000 square feet of impervious that we are permitted to use, and still use the simplified stormwater management facility requirements. So we think we can make that work. And so we are saying at this point, it's our intention to try and widen the area that was mentioned in comment number 3, and still try to achieve the less than 2,000 square feet of new impervious.
Dave, if I may, when you spoke, you said something about them narrowing the driveway, but that's not the case. They're not making the driveway more narrow. They have an area that is a little bit narrow in the middle, and they're not making it more narrow. That's the way it is. So when I looked at the plan, the driveway isn't narrow at the entrance of the roadway, which would be the most dangerous spot to have a narrow driveway. And they have widening that they're going to do with PennDOT and their application there.
You're correct. I did misspeak, but the desire was to have the driveway 20 feet. That was my purpose of bringing it up.
Okay, I thought you had misunderstood because you said they were narrowing it, so I just wanted to say something.
Now that we talked a lot about the driveway on the west side, I do have a concern now that that driveway goes to parked cars and you can't turn around. I have a concern that there's no ability to turn around once you head down the west driveway. I think it's just going to get chewed up when people pull off.
No, to clarify, I would not intend that would be used for customer parking. That would be something that if my tech had to put the vehicle off to the side of the shop while waiting on a part or something like that, that it wouldn't eat up one of the other parking spots that would be easily accessible for customers. Customers wouldn't be permitted or required to go up that way. And if we're talking about after hours, tech drives it up there, it can be backed down or backed up the driveway and driven straight back down into the general parking area as well. Or if we complete the loop, then they can drive back out and go around the building entirely as an option.
It sounds like similar to what Brent said is, make sure you have enough parking spaces to meet our requirements. But if you don't need to have parking spaces, maybe you would leave them off the final plan over to the southwest of the building so that it looks that you were leaving that open. And it's your choice then whether to use it as parking space, but you're not labeling parking spaces to block that driveway.
Oh, certainly. And we'll like Chip mentioned, we will only label we'll modify it to only label the spaces which are directly accessible to customers as the parking spaces. And I believe that we have more than the requirement without impeding on those requirements from you guys. We'll have more than 2 spaces for every bay without having double parking, without including any of the other, there's going to be paving that isn't considered a parking space that I may end up parking a vehicle. Bless you. And that's all that I'm saying about that. It's not something that's going to be considered a parking space or try to be labeled as such. I think we more than meet the requirement without that.
Yes, but Pete, tell me if I'm wrong. Wouldn't we be concerned about paving a driveway that just dead-ended, that we knew you couldn't turn a vehicle around? You'd have to back the vehicle back up the driveway in order so that you wouldn't drive off of it. Because my concern would be, in 2 years, it's just there's going to be a turnaround at the end. And it doesn't matter who's driving on the grass. It's being compacted and it becomes impervious.
Well, from my perspective, again, the double stack between the spaces on that western side, the 6 and the 4, those four, the way I see this potentially going is those 4 spaces are where the mechanic is going to go put a car when he's, needs the parts, as Nuri indicated. You're going to jockey a car out of the way, or if that car is the last appointment in the day, somebody drops it off, they're going to move it into one of those spots. Again, it's already hard gravel. I think it should be paved, those 4 spots. Whether they're striped as parking or not is another story, and that would also allow you to make the loop. But similar like a car dealership, things like that, where you double park cars and it's a planned event, I don't see a problem with it.
Okay.
With Chip's response to the driveway and finding horse trading, does anybody have any further discussion on 2 or 3, or can we move on?
I was going to say for number 3, they were looking for a waiver to not have that 80 foot of driveway widened to the full 20 feet. And I think I would be okay with that because it's widened around the shop. It's widened at the entrance. It's only in the middle of the driveway. So if, it's not going to block someone from coming in off of 896 and causing an issue or a problem. And you'll be able to have a car sitting and waiting to leave and another car coming in off of 896. That's not a problem. So this narrow area, I don't really have a problem with giving them a waiver to not have to pave that middle 80 feet, the full 20 foot width. And that's what they were asking here, is a waiver for that. So I don't know.
Understand. I understand
else?
that. I also thought Chip answered that you would be looking for horse trading pervious to impervious and not have to have the waiver. Did I misunderstand you?
Well, when I chatted with Pete about my idea, which is in red there, he said he preferred that we do, he suggested that we consider widening that area and finding some impervious that we could cannibalize. And as we said, horse trade. And so I'm amenable to that as long as we can make it work. I have done this sort of thing in the past in a situation like this where there is a second entrance. But we are looking forward to accommodating anything that you all want that we can. And so if we can make Pete's idea work, I'm happy with it.
If you can't make Pete's idea work, you're going to ask for the waiver, right?
Well, that would be an option.
Okay, so but that's what we need to vote on at the end of this, is whether or not we're going to recommend getting that waiver or not. So it sounds like you're not completely committed to not asking for the waiver. So it sounds like you still need to ask for the waiver in case it comes up next, because we still need to recommend on that.
I would like to know if that's a possibility. Absolutely.
And the wild card I'd like to throw out for the consideration, and this becomes a building code question, so I might default to Chuck. I'm not the building guy, and that's down the road. You get into how wide does the driveway need to be for fire access? So if that defaults back to 20 feet, which is the position I was taking, that kind of mirrors in with this for safe two-way traffic, I don't know that that's something you could waive from that standpoint, since it would become a fire code issue. We're not talking about that now, but I think it's important to mention that, and that may take some research to understand that. So if a waiver is ultimately requested and you ultimately consider that, then so be it. I think there need to be a caveat to the fire code.
So I think as a commission, we always try to strive to not have waivers if they're not needed. And it sounds like you can put a ruler and pen to paper and give a really good try at figuring this out.
If that's the feeling of the board, we'll presume that we need to make it work.
Any other comments, Planning Commission? Want to move on to number 4?
So simply, landscaping has not been considered. However, we have plenty of room, and the owner is more than willing to do what is required to meet the landscaping requirements. So we simply have said that we will provide adequate landscaping to meet the code.
And same with number 5, you have no
Right.
problems with 5. And how about if we move on to comment 6?
So my comment really speaks to the status of our project. The architect has done plans for the modification of the building. There has not been an address to any outside storage. I can't say for sure how much the architect thought about that requirement. We will, however, give it appropriate thought, and if unless they believe they don't need outside storage, we'll look for an opportunity to provide it.
Can I ask Nori if you need outside storage?
I would need outside storage. Is there, I actually don't have this in front of me. Specifically, what type, are we talking about vehicle storage, part storage, just a broad spectrum?
In the comment, it says that this outdoor storage would contain parts, equipment, drums, et cetera, associated with vehicle repairs. So it wouldn't be the vehicles themselves, but it would include drums of oil, an outdoor area where you might place an old engine or transmission. I don't know what else you use for equipment, but any equipment that would be associated with it. I mean, you have a large building. I think you'd want to keep your equipment inside away from the weather, but that's what the comment says.
Yeah, as large as it is, it'll fill up remarkably quickly, I imagine. And in terms of outside storage for that sort of thing, the only thing that I could think of that could fit under that I would really require, I'm not going to put engines and things outside. It's never a bad thing to have extra storage in the terms of, I don't know where a storage container falls into place. If we're creating issues that will interfere with the parking lot, like that, that's another problem. That's something I can address down the road. Initially, out of the gate, I should be able to use that space. Now, again, the only thing out of the gate that I think that would fall under that would be a waste oil tank, for example, which I have areas inside the garage that are not going to be accessible for cars anyway. The pavers are built up because the thing is built into the hill. So there's a lot of extra heavy duty stuff in the back of the garage where I could stack it on top. I could find ways to put it indoors as well and still have the capacity that I require for waste oil disposal and things like that. But if it's possible to have a 250-gallon tank sit outside like that, then that would grant me more space for other stuff, of course. So yeah, that's something that could be useful to me, to have some, depending on what it affects, to have outdoor storage very minimally and up against the building largely as well. Not out in the middle of the field or anything like that, of course.
Is that why you noted it, Pete?
Yeah, it's just like with the like a signage, or are they going to have it or are they not? Usually these uses have it. So I think either they're still in the sketch play stage. So I think Chip can evaluate with his client. Are they going to have any need for that? Do they think maybe they show an area of outdoor storage just to show it, so it's memorialized and it would have a fence, or they put a note on the plan, at least in my opinion, that would say there is no intended outdoor storage proposed as part of this plan. And then
I think Pete's trying to help us here, and we appreciate it. We will look into that, and if we believe it's needed, we will show it, and we will make it work within our calculations. Of course, it would be another block of impervious surface, and we're running short on that. But nonetheless, Pete's being realistic, and so we need to take a hard look at it.
Great, thank you.
Would it have to be paved and be impervious, or could it just be a pervious area if it was like a temporary storage area?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brent. I mean, maybe that could be on a like a porous stone. You know, if it's a 1B or 2B type stone material, or that could be some other type of material. It's a twofold thing. It's more a screening requirement from my perspective when I think about it. A secondary aspect could be the impervious cover count, depending what the surfacing of it is.
Well, I think that, I mean, that gives us a little more latitude, and we appreciate it.
If there's any thought of outdoor storage of oil or other chemicals, it needs to be paved, because if there's a spill, you can't clean it up from stone, but you can contain it on a pad that was paved. So if there's any thought that you would put any used oil or anything out there, I would recommend that it needed to be paved, just because of the nature of what's in the storage.
Okay.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Pete, that leads me to one other question, if you don't mind. Relating again to the widening of the driveway, you mentioned pervious stone. Would that be a acceptable use of widening for something that would be, you know, for if on the rare occasion that there would be two cars passing each other would need that extra width, would we be able to use something that would not count against our impervious?
I'd have to look into that. Again, that gets into, again, we may have dual masters here between township code requirements and building code requirements of what that needs to be. I'll point out again, if we're trading impervious surfaces, again, there's a lot of, I think, what I would call unused impervious around the rectangle garage. As I look at the plan, I know you show a couple parking spaces there, and I don't know physically how that works in the field for you, but there's probably areas to create grass over there to trade impervious a bit.
Same by on the east end, the smaller garage in front of that. Yeah,
correct.
that's another consideration Chip brought to me as well, to potentially remove that to gain where we need it elsewhere. That's
Right.
a possibility.
I assume maybe you still want to keep the connection between what I call the residential driveway and the commercial driveway, but I don't know that you need to do that. And if impervious becomes an issue, then separate them.
If necessary, and if we need to get the space there, that is certainly a consideration. Yeah.
We did have early sketches that did separate the residential driveway from the driveway to the shop for that exact purpose, so that we could try and make it work, give him everything he needs in terms of impervious, but still stay within the simplified requirements for stormwater.
Right. And I think it would discourage when people go to leave that they're going to be, you know, coming in and out the wrong driveway potentially. So it's something to think about.
Sure. Yeah. My thought was to gate the driveways from each other so that there was no chance that people would decide to head that way. But yeah, I mean, again, if we need the space, it'd be it's something that's possible to take from there. If it's possible to do without doing that, I think there are advantages that way as well for me personally. So, and for a business. So either way, we'll see how that works out, but definitely a good suggestion and something that we've been considering.
If they felt like they still needed a surface to drive on, could that be a pervious surface, grass pavers, since building code probably and safety would probably be met by the commercial driveway if it gets to be 20 feet?
Yeah, I think there's lots of flexibility on the residential driveway side, the eastern driveway, we'll call it, or from that standpoint, the other commercial, you know, you've got 2 lanes, fire trucks, you got all these other considerations to look at, delivery trucks coming in, heavier trucks, things like that. So I think you could do like a grass paver connection, rip out 40 feet of paving, but just put down 2 tracks of grass pavers if you really wanted to have a connection between there, and only you would know about it in area because it would look like grass. So you could get a little creative with that or the landscaping, so it doesn't, it has a different look and feel to it from a motorist viewpoint.
Yeah.
So I think you've got lots of options, and Chip can help you through that.
Agreed.
Are we ready to move on from driveway?
I believe so.
I don't, conforming with subdivision, land development, stormwater, is there anything comment, Pete, to make on stormwater? I mean, obviously the applicant knows there's nothing on here and it has to be shown on the final plan. Any guidance we need to give at this time?
They do show, I'll just point out a proposed stormwater area on the project there on the southern side. So that was good. Chip and I and Nuri were on a call with him earlier. So in the week, as was mentioned, we've talked about some ideas for that. So for the good of the order and the I don't think we need to get into that unless anybody wants to discuss it. I think Chip has a good understanding of what the expectation is applicable to this property and ordinance requirements.
The stormwater specifically for this type business is going to concern itself a lot with cleaning, correct, Pete?
Right.
Okay. And so that falls under the simplified method?
I couldn't find something that says just because you're a hotspot that you get kicked out of it. I originally thought that too, Chuck.
Yeah.
My reading of your code, because I looked for the same problem, the reading, as I read your code, if it's a hotspot, there must be some method of pre-treatment. And the good news is there are many ways to go with pre-treatment. And so so far, I cannot find anything in your code that precludes the use of the simplified method in the event that you are a hotspot, that you simply need to provide adequate pre-treatment prior to the simplified treatment methods allowed.
So in addition to the simplified, Pete, you're going to need some evidence of pre-treatment?
Yes.
Got it.
Good, do we want general comments?
The first general comment is that we are requesting and have submitted a request for a waiver to go preliminary/final, to skip the preliminary step. We are hopeful that it seems appropriate for this project.
Seeing that Pete agrees with you, I would think that the commission would go along with granting that waiver. Any opposition to that, guys?
No.
I don't have an opposition, but to clarify, isn't it still considered that you go for both preliminary and final, as opposed to skipping preliminary?
That might have been word choice.
Yeah, I think I referenced like a combined plan, so it'd be preliminary/final.
Right.
Okay. No objection.
This second item, if I can move ahead, refers to the existing well. The existing well, based on my reading of the permit and the design of the well as approved, that well provides for both the house and the shop and the residential accessory garage use on the east side of the plan. And we did submit the well and septic, all available information about the well and septic. Not that you need to spend your time reading that if you don't want to.
So where that comment was generated from, though you will notice there are 2 septic systems on the property, there's only 1 well.
And that's pretty much the health department's determination, right? we wouldn't require separate wells or,
No, unless the county does for some reason, but I'm not aware of that. So it was just a question of, is there another well in the property we need to know about or not? So if there is only one well and it serves all three buildings, as I'll call it, then that's just a simple notation on the plan moving forward.
I would only request clarification. I know that we have to go to the county health department to obtain assurances that the septic system approved for a mushroom house is an adequate septic system for the proposed mechanic shop. My question at this moment is, are you requiring us to go to them to get some sort of additional assurance, or if the well was built and approved, is it considered by the township to be adequate?
I'll take a stab at that. I'm not the sewer or water engineer for the township in that sense, but I assume the well had a permit, and I think
Yes.
something like that will get flushed out during the review of the sewage by the county. And then normally
so
the
we don't-
township.
So my notation here tonight is that I don't need to go get some separate acceptance by the health department of a single well meeting the needs of all three buildings.
I'm going to say no at this point. I would, with a caveat that I will just circle back with Jeff Vogels from a building code standpoint, unless Chuck knows that answer off the top of his head, but I'm going to think that the answer is no.
Does the county review wells for specific uses?
they do for ag versus human consumption.
Okay.
And then also, I don't know what they determine as public water, whether this would require public water permitting, and surveillance and testing.
The 1999 well documentation indicates that the well does meet the standard to be a potable water well. I'm not sure that answers your question, but I offer it as information.
So then with that data that he's referencing, if it had a permit, it met potable standards. Again, that was kind of the question too, were there multiple wells? Was this just a well for irrigation for the mushroom house and a separate one for the well? But perhaps that question is already answered in the data he's got.
Right, and again, I'm not suggesting you have to read every word that we've submitted, but we did submit that information.
Are you increasing the number of plumbing fixtures in
In the building? Yes. Yeah, the idea is to add an additional sink and additional toilet. Separate the techs from customers.
So when you go to get your building permit, there's a certain amount of water that's required for those fixtures according to the plumbing code. So you need to make sure that your well is providing enough water to support all the required fixtures.
Makes sense. Good to know. Yeah. And they told me it's I believe a 500-foot well. I'm not 100% sure. They said it was pretty deep. So there's some reasonable expectation it should be able to provide it. We'll see, I guess, up to the county at that point, what they say about it.
But you're also doing away with two fixtures in the current residence, which is a garage. Is that correct?
If necessary, I would. That other garage is going to be for my personal use and things like that. So it wouldn't be a terrible thing to have a toilet in there. Sink, not as much necessary, but nice place. I don't need a shower in there. I guess so there could be trade-offs made that way if necessary. Absolutely.
I don't know if it's necessary, but just a thought.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully the well is adequate to supply the new as well as the old. If it's not, then we have a task ahead of us.
I believe it is only going to come into effect during the building permit phase. Right, Pete?
From my perspective, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want to move on?
Yes.
The next item talks about the zoning table will need to be expanded. We're aware and happy to say that we'll comply with that. Further, on number 4, we will make very clear information available right on the plan, documenting the conditions. And really, there's the one important condition regarding the existing additional dwelling unit that used to be in the residential accessory building. And we'll make it clear that we will meet the condition of the zoning hearing board. Number 5, if I can just sort of push ahead, we will address whether or not Nori is proposing a sign and find a location and propose something that is in compliance or apply for a variance. We have stated previously, and I believe there's already a note on the plan, that we do not propose any use or signage on the adjacent residential parcel that has the same ownership. That's on the west side up at the road. There's an acre of land there. So no improvements or construction related to the new shop is proposed on the second parcel.
Okay,
Number 6 talks about the health department must find adequate, or we must make modifications to the septic system that services the mushroom house, barn, or soon to be mechanic shop. And so we will, we've actually already started filling out the forms. Number 7 talks about providing impact fees. While I didn't write it in red, we obviously know that we have to comply with requirements associated with that. Number 8, the recreation area. In our recent conversation with Joan and Pete, Joan was kind enough to look up the fee in lieu amount and found it to be $1,800. So now Nuri is aware that if he chooses to go fee in lieu, he knows the order of magnitude that he must meet.
Joan, if I can ask just for clarification and to help Chip and Nuri, is that payable with the plan approval or is that payable at the building permit stage?
Permit stage.
Okay. So I think Chip would help you to note that on the plan then, that fee, those 2 fees, whatever they would be payable relative to permit issuance.
Okay, now when we talk about permit issuance, we're talking about the building permit to modify the building?
Yes.
Okay.
looking down the road, I believe we would have those fees by the time final approval would be given, correct? And we usually make that part of the final approval.
Yes.
That won't be a problem.
I was just a little bit confused by that. We just talked a moment ago about the fee in lieu is due with the building permit fee. Are we now talking about impact fees being required at the approval of the minor land development plan?
They're also due with the permit.
Also due with the building permit? Okay,
Well,
thank you.
we would know what that fee amount is at the time of plan approval.
Oh, got it. Thank you. So moving to number 9, plan notes the applicant will be seeking a PennDOT permit permit. Though no changes are proposed to the eastern entrance, PennDOT, our expectation is they're likely going to ask us to include that on the permit. So that's what we'll have to do. Number 10, the applicant will need to obtain approval of the conservation district. We're aware of that. I asked Pete the other day and he said that we will simply go to conservation district independently once we have a plan that we believe is. Number 11, the applicant will need to post financial security as part of the plan approval. We just talked about that, those numbers being determined during the minor land development process, but not payable until the building permit is drawn.
The only correction I would make on your number 11 there, Chip, that one is due as part of plan approval.
Okay, so the financial security, that assures that we build it per our design, and so that that is to be paid at the land development approval.
Correct.
Is that what I understood you to say?
What would happen, and I'm not sure, you're breaking up a little bit, at least on my end, Chip. I'm not sure if everybody's hearing that or not. But ultimately, as you go through the process here, the plan will get to a point where there are maybe no design changes, maybe some additional notations. You would ultimately put together a cost estimate for various improvements, stormwater, E&S controls, things like that. We ultimately review that, we agree on a number, and then your client puts up a cash bond or financial security acceptable to the township, and that's part of the ultimate approval to get the plan recorded. So that's important for Nuri to know going into this, just so he realizes he'll need to be able to have that cash. Now, the moment you get it built, we go through the inspection process, and then that money is returned. You submit a request to the township, it gets released ultimately. So the quicker you build it, that money comes right back to you. But Nuri needs to know that now, because that's just something else to consider in the financial pro forma.
Got it. And that's separate from the impact fees. The impact
Correct.
fees we just discussed are due at a building permit.
Right.
So this is just assurance money that we build what we say we're going to build.
Correct. So it's intended to cover the construction cost of that in this arena, as we'll call it. So if you estimate that to be $20,000, $30,000, whatever it is, we ultimately agree upon a number. That money gets posted with an agreement. You build the improvements, that money gets released. That's the process that everybody goes through. We do it all the time. Nuri, this may be your first time through it.
It's new to me, but I understand.
Right.
Whatever's necessary.
Right.
All right, we appreciate that clarification. I'm out of comments here on your letter, Pete. Thank you. We want to address anything and everything you all want to chat about, but we don't want to keep you here any longer than is necessary. So we're available to talk about other stuff.
One question on your interior plan. You have a shop area 1 where you're going to pour 6 inch of concrete. Your shop area 2, you're going to keep the concrete that's currently there. You're going to be putting 3 lifts in there. I assume the floor is adequate for the anchor bolts for those lifts?
So that's what we are going to discover when we drill down, whether or not we'll need to pour footers for the lifts in the upper garage. That is up in the air at the moment until I determine what's there. I don't know the thickness of the pad currently, and I don't know if it goes that thick all the way back. So that's going to be coming down to what's there. And obviously, whatever the requirement for the lift is, I will be rolling no dice with lifts falling over with vehicles and potentially hurting techs and all of that.
I would think not. Okay.
I have a question on the plan. what the dashed lines are versus the solid property lines? The dashed lines appear to be property lines?
The difference between
Tax
zone-
lines, I believe they're tax, I believe there are tax map parcel numbers, that do not precisely agree with the surveyed boundary lines. It's pretty common in my experience. We will not show them on the final plan because they do just what we're just experiencing here. They confuse folks.
Yeah.
We simply utilized what Nori paid good hard money for. We utilized the survey plan that he obtained for the sketch plan and chose not to take it off.
That also shows the different zoning areas too.
Yeah.
ELI
Right.
the village.
Right. My expectation is, however, that the zoning line will fall on the boundary line as surveyed. We wouldn't want tiny little slivers of the different zoning on a portion of Nori's parcel or the adjoining parcel. So I assume that the zoning boundary corresponds with the surveyed property line. Am I wrong there?
It looks like it should match up.
That's been, I've never had it work out other than that, but every project has its unique points. And you can see that the surveyor that did the Alta survey showed the zoning boundary lines on the surveyed property line rather than on the tax parcel line.
Right.
Any other discussion on the plan, guys? So we do or don't vote officially on a sketch plan. I thought we just gave recommendations of a sketch plan.
That was my belief.
Me too.
Well, you're recommending that he can go to the preliminary final plan, correct?
Right, so we'd be willing to, there's no concern in granting a waiver for that. I think we gave enough discussion and comments on the driveway impervious versus impervious, and would look for a design that would not require a waiver. What other major comments or questions that you may still have, Nori or Chip?
I feel like we got good input from you. I've made a fair number of notes. We've agreed to do some things on the preliminary final plan. Otherwise, we look forward to any other recommendations that you might make, and we'll consider, your recommendations.
Dave,
Yeah.
I think we would make the waiver for preliminary final at their next application, because if they don't provide us with enough information for final, at this point, we can't say that they're going to provide us with enough information for preliminary final in the next submission.
Right, that's why it's all our recollection that we're not making a motion or a vote at this time. Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that as long as that's a possibility for next time, and we understand that as long as we provide exactly what you are requiring of us, that can potentially turn into that, then that's really nice. I also just appreciate that everyone's able to make the accommodations to do a Zoom meeting in lieu of all the current events, and I really appreciate everyone's time and being able to help me push forward with this project, regardless.
Yeah, and this is Chip. In an effort to try and understand how to best move forward, I believe then I'm hearing you say that we need to put together a plan that meets all of the final requirements, and then upon its review, we may be permitted to call it preliminary final. We can't at this point proceed with that assumption.
I'd agree with that statement. It's up to the applicant to make sure they have everything that meets final plan.
Because obviously Nuri's a small business. We want to get him going. We're going to make every effort to make preliminary final work. I have to admit that I thought we were going to receive the waiver, but every township is different, and so we'll proceed accordingly.
Great, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Will there, one last question, will there be any output from the Planning Commission as a consequence of this meeting?
There will be minutes.
30 minutes.
Transcribed, and we can do a draft copy.
Okay, and about how long does that take?
What do you think, Sharon? In about a week.
Great, we'll look forward to that, and
Okay.
we won't hold you to 7 days. We just, we'll, if a couple weeks goes by, we'll probably give you a call.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank
Will
you.
Send those minutes to me before we send them out, so I can look at them.
Yes,
All right.
and this has been recorded on the
Yeah, I know.
Township Facebook page, so if you have questions, you can look at it there again.
And thank you, Joan, for the pretty backdrop.
Okay.
Moving on, any public comment?
You have one? None.
Being none, we'll adjourn at 8:14. What's the plan for July?
Well, we have to see how brave everyone is.
We'll probably do a Zoom meeting, I think.
And also, the 2nd of July is your meeting date, and the 3rd is considered a holiday since the 4th is on a Saturday. So do you still want to do that on that Thursday, or do you want to consider moving it?
Maybe I shouldn't adjourn so quickly. I didn't think ahead that I'll be away on the 2nd.
I'll be gone also. Well,
Most
if
people,
the airlines let me fly.
well, a lot of people will, so do you want to consider moving the meeting 1 week out?
The 9th.
I won't be available the following week, but don't base it on me.
Yeah, I won't be available.
I mean, it
Following week.
makes sense just to move it for everyone, it sounds like.
Are you
What
gonna
was
be
the last-
available, Zach?
What was the last comment?
Well, two of the members won't be available that second week.
And to the first week.
Let's see, Chip is off. We can check with him and see if he thinks he would have something ready by then. If they don't have anything ready, then there may not be a need to have it. So I can check with him tomorrow.
I mean, I guess, what am I thinking? It's Zoom. I could Zoom in for a meeting.
I could too the following week, so.
I could. Well, no, I couldn't.
Well, let me check with Chip and see if he thinks he's ready. Does
So
that
we'll
make-
leave it as planned right now. Is that your thought, or?
Yes, because we don't know unless you just want to move it to the 9th. I don't, you know, Chuck would be the only one who can't zoom in, correct?
Chuck,
You don't want to see me at 3 a.m. I'm going to be in Germany, so.
Ah,
Yeah,
But for me to understand, Chuck, you're gonna miss both,
Yes.
you would miss both weeks. So
Yes.
let's move it to the 9th then.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Night.